Today's review is sponsored by Hit and Run Driving School. Road rage done responsibly.
Watch it, Alan. I'm shooting.
The New York Ripper. There's always room for Giallo. Time for some blood-soaked fun from the Italian master of gore, Lucio Fulci. I love me some gritty, dirty, urban thrillers, especially sleazy New York flicks. Cities are my favorite setting when it comes to horror movies. So many horror movies take place in the woods or off the beaten path. But I like city-based horror movies. It shows that even in civilization, you ain't safe. New York Ripper is one of the bloodier gialli in the genre. We follow a veteran cop who teams up with a college psychoanalyst so they can try to stop a serial killer who's stalking the streets of New York City. This particular slasher has a nasty habit of cutting up beautiful women in some very brutal ways. We've got bloodshed, a lot of nudity, and duck quacking. We'll get into that. There's a debate amongst Italian horror fans on if New York Ripper is actually a Giallo movie. Some people say it's more of a slasher movie, mostly because it takes place in New York City. Giallo movies and slasher movies have always kinda gone hand in hand. Other than movies like Psycho and Peeping Tom, Giallo movies were a big stepping stone for the slasher genre. Here's a perfect example. The movie may take place in New York City, but the vibe is 100% Italian. Everything about this movie feels like a Giallo flick. We've got the typical dubbing, we only see the gloved hands of the killer, the kills are anything but painless, the music feels very Italian, so I'm on the Giallo side of things. If you disagree and you think New York Ripper is a slasher, not a Giallo, alright. It doesn't really matter. It's a good movie regardless of what genre you put it in.
She was murdered, wasn't she?
11 people a day are murdered here in Fun City, and over half of them are women. Goodbye.
In terms of Giallo flicks, New York Ripper is a standout in the genre. It's definitely one of the sleazier movies. There's always an element of sleaze when it comes to Giallo flicks. Some movies are just sleazier than others. You have the ones that focus more on atmosphere and mystery, like The Bloodstained Butterflies, Deep Red, Short Night of Glass Dolls. Then you have the sleazier gialli, like Strip Nude for Your Killer and What Have You Done to Solange, a movie where the killer kills women by stabbing them in the hoo-ha. New York Ripper is full of sleaze and some of the most brutal deaths in giallo or slasher flicks. This is a very harsh movie, which is one of the reasons it's so effective. Every on-screen kill is just so violent. We see each cut with gratuitous detail. Nothing is held back. And what we don't see, we're told later, making things even more painful.
He used a blade. He stuck it up her joy trail and slit her wide open. He could have done a slightly better job if he'd had more time.
All the kills are standout kills, but there's one particular scene that demonstrates just how brutal this flick gets. There's a prostitute tied to her bed, with the cops racing to her apartment to try and save her. But the killer is there, with a razor blade. And, dear God, there's a lot I can't show here because of the nudity, but this nutjob takes this little razor blade and just tears this poor woman apart. He cuts open her stomach, cuts open her nipple, cuts open her eyeball. It's one of the most brutal kills in any horror movie. Which brings us to this one little trait the killer has that might turn some people off to this flick. That is until you learn why the killer does this.
What do you want?
To dedicate a killing to you. Gonna sacrifice a woman just for you.
Yep. He quacks like a duck. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, chances are it's some violent psychopath stalking the streets of New York City. But yeah, I can admit the fact that our killer quacks like a duck and talks in some goofy voice can lessen the tension for some horror fans. But it doesn't bother me. In fact, it's kinda disturbing.
And she got this telephone call from this, person. Strangest voice I ever heard. Sort of like a duck.
Like a duck.
Picture this guy gutting someone while going It's an interesting mix of funny and disturbing until you learn what the killer's motives are. Now, I'm gonna have to get into spoilers here, so this is a spoiler alert, spoiler alert. For those who have not seen New York Ripper, either pause this video and go watch the movie, or skip to this time right here. I can wait. All set? Okay, here we go. We find out the killer is a guy named Peter, and we also learn that he has a daughter who's in the hospital dying.
No one's come around to see her in months now.
How much time has she got left?
Almost none. Her entire lymphatic system is shot. It's very sad.
She has this horrible disease where her body is slowly failing. Peter calls his daughter at the hospital, and they play this game over the phone called The Little Duck, where they talk to each other in this silly duck voice. That's why he talks like that, and that's also why he kills. He murders beautiful women because his daughter will never grow up to be one of them.
You're like all the rest of them, young and beautiful and healthy. Well, I rock to death in bed in a lousy, stinking hospital.
Makes the duck voice a little more fucked up, doesn't it? The setting does push this movie up for me. I love watching them go through the sleazy streets of 42nd Street, passing by all these sex shows and grindhouse theaters. I get a kick out of looking through the marquees in the background and finding a movie that I've seen. One time I caught a glimpse of An American Werewolf in London, and I just said, "Oh shit, look at that." Some people overlook this movie because of the quacking killer. If you can get past that, you're gonna get a sleazy, gritty, violent, and very well done New York horror movie. I put it up there with Maniac and Basket Case as the best New York horror flicks. Time for the Grindhouse rankings. We've got a body count of about 6. The kills consist of, but are not limited to, stabbings, broken bottles to the crotch, and complete razor blade mutilations. It reaches the Giallo requirements with gloved hands, brutal kills, red herrings, and funky music you'd only find in a Giallo. The nudity is high. Expect a fair amount of tits and bush. There's a lot of gore in this flick, which is to be expected from a Fulci movie. But it doesn't just rely on gore, there's a good amount of suspense here too. The duck quacking can be a little distracting, but once you get past that and learn why the killer does this, it makes the story all the more tragic. I'm giving this a 4.7 out of 5. Italian horror fans and gore hounds will love this one. Give this one a watch and get ready for a long shower afterwards. As always, I want to thank everyone for watching and supporting my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you like what I do here, or give it a thumbs down if you don't like what I do here. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think are some of the most brutal kills in horror. Also, do you think New York Ripper is a Giallo movie, or do you think it's more of a slasher movie?
This is the Little Duck here to remind you that the Grindhouse will never die.